Hi everyone, welcome to Infinite Women. I'm Allison, and today I wanted to share a story from my book Uncredited about survivor Ada Blackjack. She thought a man named Harold Noice was her savior, and instead he did everything he could to destroy her reputation, not out of malice, but out of greed and self-preservation. And that was after she had already survived a horrific ordeal that left 4 men dead. In 1921, unable to find work that would enable her to care for her son, who was sick with tuberculosis, and having left her abusive husband, Blackjack accepted a job that would turn into hell on earth. Vilhjalmur Stephenson, one of many white guys with more money than sense, devised a cockamamie plan to claim Wrangel Island in the Arctic and then try to sell it to the UK, Canada, or the US. So he sent 4 white guys and Blackjack, who was Inupiat, off with only 6 months of supplies for a 1-year expedition that ended up lasting 2. Their rations, of course, ran out, and the group were unable to hunt enough food to survive. Stephenson's foolishness had also created an international incident, which impeded much-needed supplies from getting to the group. 3 of the men sledded off to get help and were never seen again. The 4th man, Lorne Knight, was sick with scurvy, and so was left behind with Blackjack to care for him. Despite her best efforts, he died in June 1923, just under a month before the rescue team, led by Harold Noice, showed up. Now, even before Noice had set out, he was anticipating making money off the disaster, as his lawyer had sold exclusive newspaper rights for $3,000 in 1920s money for the story of the relief expedition. This included telling the members of the party, which turned out to only be Blackjack, not to speak with the press themselves. But, of course, Blackjack didn't know any of that as she collapsed with relief at having been rescued. She had spent almost a month with no company except a dead body and a cat named Victoria. Meanwhile, Noice immediately began looting the camp, taking both Knight's and Blackjack's diaries without her consent, as well as photos that she had taken on the island, the other men's papers, and items like a typewriter. He would later ignore her requests for the return of her belongings. Reading Knight's diary, Noice was struck by both the incompetence and the mistreatment of Blackjack. Struck by Arctic hysteria, she had experienced a mental health crisis early on, including propositioning one of the men, which, combined with a rumor that he'd heard in Nome, Alaska that she was a sex worker, painted a particular kind of picture in Noice's head. The rumor may have come from the facts that she was poverty-stricken, indigenous, and a single mother, having divorced the abusive husband that she married at 16 and left at 22, as well as someone who may have drowned her sorrows in alcohol and taken up with unsuitable men, though these rumors too may have been unfounded. But it was that desperation and need to care for her son that led her to take this job that no one else wanted. During her hysteria, the men responded by withholding food, forcing her to sleep in the cold, and tying her to a flagpole. It is incredibly impressive that she managed to recover, and this was at the start of the 2 years. Noice took it upon himself to censor the diaries, removing whole blocks of pages, including the final 10, and erasing then blacking out sections, ostensibly to protect the men's reputations. More on that in a second. He also knew that missing information would heighten the scandal that he already knew would come from the situation, and enable him to spin falsehoods and innuendo that complete copies of the diaries would belie. Despite having told multiple people that he was going to censor the diaries, He would later try to blame Blackjack for the mutilations, trying to undermine the lone survivor's ability to counter his lies. Now, any claims of protecting the men's reputations were soon proved false, as Noice, the man in charge on site, openly criticized Stephenson and Knight. For her part, Blackjack spent months adamantly avoiding the press that hounded her. While Noice's criticisms of the men were arguably well-founded, the expedition was a mess from start to finish. That wasn't enough. Spurred by his new, rich, and incredibly jealous wife, he began spreading lies about Blackjack as well. Unstable and obsessed with correcting the heroic depictions of Blackjack that were appearing in the press, Fanny Noice badgered her husband into publicizing the lies that he had privately told to appease her. One of these was the promiscuity, which only convinced Fanny that Noice himself must have slept with Blackjack as well. In addition to the claims that Blackjack was a sex worker who had been taken along to service the men in that capacity rather than cooking, sewing, and hunting, he claimed that she was lazy, that she refused to work because none of the men would agree to marry her, and rather than caring for Knight, had let him die. He claimed she refused to check the traps for animals that could be killed for food, and implied that she feigned her inability to shoot. Now, she had lived her whole life in missionary or city environments, and she had no skill with a gun prior to the expedition, but she did learn how to shoot while on Wrangel Island out of necessity. Though he had previously published an article describing her as frail and small, weighing less than 100 pounds, his new story was that Knight's body was emaciated, while Blackjack was found, quote, well and fat, claiming that she had saved her own life eating the food that would have saved Knight. Blackjack herself stated that she weighed only 90 pounds, a 25% weight loss from her typical 120. To support his other lies, Noice also made up things that he claimed that she had said, but she maintained she never did. Blackjack was hesitant to speak out against him for several reasons. A naturally private person, she had no desire to engage the reporters who were constantly following her. She had also promised both her employer and her rescuer that she would not speak with reporters, a vow that she took seriously. She also felt indebted to Noice as the man who saved her. But with his baseless attacks on her, she finally overcame these barriers, breaking her silence in February 1924. She spoke with the Los Angeles Times, which printed 3 extensive articles over 5 days. Now, Blackjack also had one advantage that many women of color don't have in cases of he said, she said. She had a rich white guy in her corner. As the instigator and funder of the expedition, Stephenson had a vested interest in combating Noice's work, both the truths and the lies, as they reflected badly on his expedition and therefore his own reputation. Neither man seems to have cared about Blackjack as a person, but for Stephenson, defending her and undermining Noice was also defending himself. Stephenson was able to force Noice to write an extensive retraction, which Stephenson published in his own book in 1925, destroying Noice's reputation and ensuring that his version of events would not go down in history as the main narrative of Blackjack's story. Now, for her part, other than her expedition salary and a few $100s that she earned for furs that she had trapped on Wrangel Island, Blackjack did not benefit at all from those 2 years. But she was able to use the money that she saved to take her son to Seattle, Washington, get his tuberculosis treated, and he did recover and survive to adulthood. She remarried and had another son, Billy, as well. Eventually, she returned to the Arctic, where she lived until the age of 85. Join us next time on Infinite Women, and remember, well-behaved women rarely make history.